branding. Words drive everything. They drive experience, they drive innovation, they drive culture. What you're trying to do is use words that break pattern disruption. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit. And then emotional goes back to, just to reiterate, the fact that all decisions are made in basically the emotional part of the brain. We like to think we're all logic, we're super logic, enlightened creatures that are making thoughtful decisions based off of the latest information. And if you look at the spate of, normalized conspiracy theories these days, you can see that's not true. We are easily susceptible to something that appeals to the emotion. The other thought here too, if you're as a marketing leader, simple and unexpected are your job. Emotional, yes, you need to feel it as well. But we would ask you to, and I'm sure you do this already, to be judicious with emotion. Don't use people's fears or insecurities to manipulate them. We paraphrase, or directly quoting Oprah, don't add more darkness to the world. And marketing adds darkness a lot. It adds more confusion, because it kind of works as a business model. I mean, the whole life insurance industry runs on, scaring people that, your family might be destitute if you die and don't have life insurance. So that's like almost like a code of ethics. Like you've been given this power to say things to the world about your brand, and you want to be gentle with emotion, not manipulative. So a question for Jen as Chief of Story. What is the tie between message and story? So, and just for the audience, Emily and I do the root sessions with our clients, and then one of the deliverables out of that often is their brand story that Jen takes the lead on. Sometimes Jen's in the room, sometimes she's not. But your role in this gift that you have, or great skill that you bring, is turning the message the root belief and the narrative and the message into a story. What's the connection between those two, and why do they need to go together?
Yeah, good question. So when Justin and Emily are in the room with a client, they spend all day on a lot of the branding language, and a lot of that time is spent on the message, and fine-tuning that and making sure it's great and it reflects the beliefs of everyone. And I find when we need to translate that message into story, these messages are so rich and packed with emotion that everyone in the organization has a different spin-off and a different take. And that's the sign of a good message, is if there's hundreds of stories, hundreds of stories that can come from that one single message. So while the message is important, story kind of comes in right after it, to reinforce the message, to reinforce the belief, to kind of pack in more of that emotion that the message holds. So we use that message as the foundation for all storytelling, and we try to find stories within the organization that tie back to that bigger message. It usually starts with the origin story, looking at the brand, we call it the brand story, looking at, how far the brand has come, and, how those beliefs were shaped over time. And that's really where you get a lot of really rich branding language, excellent copy, great material for marketing, because you're using the beliefs you have as a brand to start telling stories.
Great.
Some great points there. Love it.
Excellent. Excellent. It's always intriguing to me. The other thing that's intriguing is how your behavioral style, your personality, for lack of a better term, influences how you communicate. So Kat, one of her roles as our chief of staff is, not every client, but most clients, the client will do a DISC assessment, and then Kat will do a debrief with them around what we call the original you, which is your original brand, who you really are. And this applies to corporate marketing leaders or solo entrepreneurs. It's the same thing, same source. So Kat, the question for you is how does your DISC profile, your behavioral style, impact how you communicate?
A great question. I think as humans, we have a bias that we communicate we communicate with others the way we want to be communicated with. And we forget that there's really four primary profiles. So D for dominance. They're more of a one-directional type of communicator unless they are enlightened or practice otherwise. They prefer to do the talking and everyone else listen. So those high D people that I talk to, just encouraging them to understand that, you know, S's need wait time and C's need things in writing and I's need to talk about their feelings. So being aware that the way you communicate and the way you like to be communicated with is not necessarily everybody else's preference. And it's being aware of that. And people sometimes for the first time go, oh, shit, I never thought of that. I's more are, they communicate in the inspiring ways. They want to try to bring people along with their ideas. And I encourage those folks to, when you're talking to a high D, make sure you have your points, make sure it's, you know, you're succinct. They don't want to talk about their weekend for 2 hours. They want to get to right to business. So it's understanding that each communication requires different things and understanding your audience. Your S people, they really prefer, that S stands for steadiness. They really prefer like one-on-one communication. They'd much rather listen than talk. So drawing those people out, sometimes asking them first their response instead of letting them, you know, fall into the shadows. And then our C people, C stands for compliance. They really like written communication. So knowing that when you're communicating with those folks, that following up with written communication is really handy, just to solidify the communication. So that you're not a chameleon, but you're understanding that everybody communicates differently, and that you can't just expect, well, this is the way I communicate, and everyone better just fall in line. It's really a two-way street.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, you can tell. Whether Enneagram or DISC or Myers-Briggs, you can tell when a brand has done some deep due diligence into the profiles of their audiences. So one of my favorite examples is looking through the owner's manual of a BMW. So you can see that they've got all 9 of the Enneagram stuff communicating in there, and they have all the 4 DISC styles that you talk about, Kat.
That's cool.
That, and you know, and that's not really market research. You're not going out to the market going, hey, our audience are high Ds. Yeah, maybe if you're selling to old white corporate executive men, you know, you're going to get a lot of high Ds and a lot of high Cs. But it's not that. It's more just understanding that blending the communication styles and being aware of your own bias of how you communicate.
Mm-hmm.
So question for our panel or for our audience members, as we kind of went through these ideas on storytelling and behavioral style and message, was there anything that jumped out that you feel like you're doing right within your organization with your message or in regards to storytelling? Is there something that you're like, oh yeah, our message is really simple, or something where, oh, we came up with our own message, we didn't look to the market? So is there anything that felt like, oh yeah, we did that right? We'd love to hear from you before we get into some of the frustrations. So let us know if there was something that hit you or that you really responded to. Discussion.
And as you guys ponder that, I want to, and that comes, I don't know these people, but whoever's running branding for Progressive lately, I don't know if you've seen their ads where all their various sectors are on Zoom, and and they did that quickly. They adapted quickly too. And it's not like now more than ever, or in these unprecedented times. And, you know, we're going to help you out. We would like you to buy a brand new car, and we're not going to ask for payment for another 3 months. You know, like, it's not that. It's just, they're just being fun and clever.
And timely.
Right. Yeah. So that's one that comes to mind. I was like, that's doing it right, understanding what we call humanistic marketing, which is at the end of the day, these aren't really consumers, they're humans, and they got hopes, fears, dreams, and pain and joy and all, you know, scars, all that stuff.
All right, cool. Well, seeing none, that must mean that you're ready for the frustrations part. So we're going to move into some of the findings that we came up with after asking our inner circle of marketers within the Fortune 1000, I would say, what their biggest frustrations were. And so these were sort of the top three findings. So the first one.
Hey, Jay
Yeah.
has,
Oh, yeah.
Jay has an answer sorry to interrupt, but it'd be good to.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So Jay says, we tested a landing page and the original copy had a lot of beautiful language using words like oasis. Then we tested it again and cut straight to the value props. Simple copy performed much better. And there's more context to this, but too much type. Understood. Cool.
Thank you,
Yep.
Jay.
I'll chime in there. I think I sometimes think as marketers we have this tendency, like we have to make it really beautiful and we have to overcomplicate it and we have to, show our credibility and we have to do all of these things. And sometimes I think the most effective copy sounds like you're talking to a friend. It's conversational, it feels lighter, it feels less intimidating. And I think there's something to that, Jay. And I'm not surprised. And sometimes when we overcomplicate things, it's not as great as when we just say it straight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's because this is an observation unbacked by actual research, but I might be right, is that I think over-explaining anything is a sign of insecurity. I think we see that in design too. Over-designed stuff is like covering something up and insecurity. And, there's no coincidence that all of your great spiritual teachers of all time spoke very plainly and very simply and very compactly. They practiced Sue as well in this process.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jay, for sharing that. It was very insightful. Cool. Okay, so back to those messaging frustrations. Okay, so the first one was, number one, was uncovering and refining a message that isn't boring and doesn't suck. Their words, and we would agree with them. So there is this tendency to just do something that's safe. And I think that has sort of been taught by a lot of marketing professionals. Like, try to do that thing where you're crowdsourcing and you're trying to find a language or a message that everyone will like. We're programmed to fit in, we're programmed to be liked and accepted. And so that tends to be the place where we end up with something that's rather boring. Also, in larger organizations, you're trying to, oftentimes, if you're the CMO or director of marketing, you're trying to get everybody on board with this message. I know when I was in that role, I was like, I gotta have a message where, the head of research believes it as much as, the CFO, because we all need to be in agreement in order to be able to convincingly use this language, which was always my intention. And that's very difficult as a director of research, a CFO, a CEO, the head of HR, to find that message that's edgy enough, but that everyone can buy into, can be a really big challenge. And I think it gets more challenging in larger corporations where you've also got a lot of legal restrictions and that kind of thing. So
yeah, outside of a logo, I don't know what's more public facing that has so many opinions than your message, because they see it. Somebody that took a marketing class in 1995 that is a senior leader was like, I don't like it. And that's why it's frustrating. And so one of the things, though, that you can do to deal with this particular frustration about it being watered down. I mean, that's usually why it becomes boring. It becomes watered down. And it's like the old saying, the camel is a horse designed by a committee. So this trying to cobble something together that everyone's going to be okay with it is a recipe for mediocrity. But there are political realities, and especially inside of larger organizations, or as a lot of our marketing, being marketers members are, you're the only marketer in the company. You're the chief cook and bottle washer of all marketing, and you've got to go get buy-in from the senior team that you may or may not be considered part of. So you have pressure on you as well that is different than if you have a marketing team that you're part of or you're leading in a larger organization. What you can do, though, to kind of break that is in your conversations with your leadership team or your sales team or whomever, the humans inside of the brand, you can ask, what do you really want to say? and encourage. And so first of all, what that does is it produces like this burst of truth. The second thing it does